Hi everyone. Hope you all are good. We are here for grade 9 math. You can find all the lessons on aplusstudents.com. You have to log in there using your email address and password as provided by the administrator. Then you have to select math from the subject tab. Scroll down to grade 9 math and then click on view all lessons. There you can find the list of the chapters. We're going to start with the chapter logic. So please make sure you have your notebook and pencil so that you can note down the important examples and definitions as well. Here I am on grade 9 math. Chapter we are on right now is logic. Let's just start with the lesson here. Let's just start with the first lesson, that is identify hypotheses and conclusions. What is the conclusion? What is the hypothesis and conclusion? What is the conclusion in this condition statement? If the city is in the United States, then it is in North. We need to find a conditional statement, right? A conditional statement can be written as if A, then B. A is the hypothesis and B is the conclusion, right? If a city is in the United States, then it is the North America. The city is the United States. The city is the North America. So if A, then B. The question is we need to find the conditional statement, right? If A, then B. So the conclusion is the part B, which states that the city is in North America. So the condition is the conditional state, the conclusion of the statement is the city is in the North America. Got it? Let's just start with the test questions. What is the hypothesis in the conditional statement? If her child is an infant, then it sleeps in a crib. We need to find the hypothesis. So if A, then B, the part that is after the if is the hypothesis and the B is the conclusion, right? So that means the hypothesis in this case is her child is an infant. Got it? The correct option is her child is an infant. So the correct option is her child is an infant. What is the conclusion in the conditional statement? If Emily studies hard, then she does well on tests. So the conclusion is Emily does well on tests. What is the conclusion in the conditional statement? That is, Emily does well on tests. What is the conclusion in the conditional statement? What is the conclusion in the conditional statement? If our pet is a mouse, then it has a tail. The conclusion is our pet has a tail. Option number one is the correct option. If a number is even, then the number divided by 2 is an integer. The conclusion is the number divided by 2 is an integer. Option number 1 is the correct option. What is the conclusion in this conditional statement? If Leah is planning a wedding, then she needs to hire a photographer and a DJ. So which is the correct option? The conclusion is Leah needs to hire a photographer and DJ. Option number 1 is the correct option. What is the hypothesis in the conditional statement? Lara is throwing a big party. Option number one is the correct option. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. Let me just move on to next lesson. The next lesson is counter examples. Which of the following is a counter example for this conditional statement? If three-dimensional solid has six faces, then it is a cube. If a three-dimensional solid has six faces, then it is a cube, a rectangular pyramid, a rectangular prism, or a cylinder. A counter example is an example in which hypothesis is true but conditional is false. A counter example is an example in which the hypothesis is true but the conclusion is false. So, if you can find a counter example to a conditional statement, then the conditional statement is false. First, notice the given statement. If a three-dimensional solid has six faces, then it is a cube. So, if A, then B, right? Now, go through the answer choices one by one, looking for the counter example, but make the hypothesis true and conclusion false. First, try the rectangular pyramid. The hypothesis is false because a rectangular pyramid does not have six faces. Next, try the rectangular prism. The hypothesis is true, but but because a rectangular prism has six faces, the conclusion is false. So that means that is the counter example. Okay, let's just start with the test questions. Which of the following is a counter example for the conditional statement? If a number has an absolute value of 5, then the number is 5. So, hypothesis for the counter example, the hypothesis must be true, but the conclusion is false. So, we're given four of the options. In the case of the first one, the number has an absolute value of 5 and the number is 5. Hypothesis is true if a number has an absolute value of 100, then the number is mm, the absolute value of a number. Okay, I just want to. The negative 5, the hypothesis is true because negative 5 has an absolute value of 5. The conclusion is false because negative 5 is not 5. Okay, the hypothesis is true because the negative 5 has an absolute value of 5. But the conclusion is false because negative 5 is not 5, right? Actually, the number is negative 5, right? The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The correct option is negative 5. Which of the following is a counter example of um, for this conditional? If the food is green, then this is a vegetable, right? So the hypothesis is true, but the condition is false for the counter example. Food is green. That is a green apple. Apple is green, but this is not a vegetable. The correct option is a green apple. Which of the following is a counter example for the conditional statement? If a student is taking notes, then he or she is using pencil. Jenna, who never takes notes in a class, Rick, who is playing soccer, Paula, who is taking notes using a pencil, and who is taking notes using a laptop. So, option number 4 is the correct option. She is taking notes but not using the pencil. Which of the following is the counter example for the conditional statement? If a sport uses a ball, then the ball is round. So, running, soccer, football, basketball, that is soccer. Sport is using the ball, but the hmm, football, but football is also round. It is football. Which of the following statement is a counter example for the conditional statement? If a person wears a uniform to work, then the person is a police officer. So, for the counter example, the hypothesis must be true, but the conclusion is false. So, let's just look at the example. Carl, who does not wear a uniform, is an artist. Vicky, who is a police officer and wears a uniform. Dane, who wears a uniform and is a pilot. Hassan, who does not wear a uniform and is marine biologist. That is Dane. He wears a uniform. That means that the hypothesis is true, but he is not police officer. So option number three is the correct option. Which of the following is a counter example for this conditional statement? If a number squared 9, then the number is 3. That is for the negative 3 because the square of negative 3 is also 9, but the number is not 3. If a food is pizza, then it is meat, it has meat on it. A burrito, a sandwich, a salad, a vegetarian pizza. I think it's a burrito. Then sandwich it is. A vegetarian pizza. Oh, pizza it is. But the conclusion is false. That doesn't has the meat. We are looking for the counter example. Sorry. Okay. Which of the following is a counter example for this conditional statement? If three dimensions solid has six faces, then it is a cube. So, which is the correct option? That is a rectangular prism. Option number four is the correct option. If a sport takes place in water, then the sport is surfing. So, which is the correct option? Water polo it is because the sports take place in water, but the sports is not. If a hands of the clocks are perpendicular, then the time is 3. That is 9. The clocks of the hands are perpendicular, but the time is not 3. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. Let me just move on to next lesson. Okay, the next lesson is, but we don't have any other lesson on the chapter. So if you have any question, you can please ask. I'm here to answer all your questions and confusions if you have any. No questions? Okay, then that's all for today.